Miroslav, welcome to another conversation around healing corporate trauma. Thanks for being here. It's lovely to have you.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I did want to open it up in just 3 questions that people might not know about you, just before we begin. So the first question is, what do you always have in the fridge?
Chocolate. Not always, I eat it sometimes, but I like it when it's in there.
Another question is, what did you want to be when you were little?
Mechanic.
Mechanic. And what book or podcast are you currently reading?
I just finished reading Neil Gaiman's American Gods.
Brilliant.
It's sensational, dark and sensational.
Yeah, Neil Gaiman is very good. Gaiman. Okay, so we have conversations around healing corporate trauma, and that's just bringing awareness to it. We're also beating burnout, and we're changing culture around these kinds of discussions. So I would love for you to tell us what it is that you currently do.
Yeah, beautiful. So currently I have 2 things. One of them is I run the Enlivened Speaking Institute, which teaches people how to present in an authentic way. And the second one is I do speaking. So talks, conferences, workshops, keynotes, all of that. And that's more aimed at the corporate workplace and owning the stage of communication in all the ways that shows up.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit about your journey into your speaking work?
Yeah, I can. The journey into it, how can I say this? It was never a logical idea. I never woke up one day and thought I wanted to be a speaker. If anything, it was quite the opposite. Speaking was probably the most terrifying thing I could have imagined. I was highly introverted. I used to stutter a lot. Came to Australia as a refugee, so English was a second language, which didn't help. Most people just assumed I was mute because I hardly used to speak. So speaking was really the product of me just getting real with my life and being like, okay, if I want to live a fulfilling life, what do I need to do? And it's the result of, asking that question over like more than 10 years now, maybe like 14 years or something. And that this is just where life's brought me as I'm desiring a deeper relationship with it.
Great. And some of these experiences to get to this stage, were you ever in the corporate world, or what other fields were you immersed in?
Yeah, so when I think of corporate, I'm always like high-rise building. Never really done work in a high-rise building. I did a lot of work in the photographic industry, and some of those places went into corporate structure. And especially I was employed by corporations to do more specific stuff for them when it came to photography and design. And this is a good, I don't know, would have been some of my first jobs out of uni. And then since then, I've obviously done work on the training side with corporates. So very different place to be sitting in compared to being in the corporation itself.
Okay. So could you tell us a little bit about that? And I'm particularly mentioning the post because I've read a post of yours recently where you were inside of a corporate environment, and you noted that after a couple of hours there, you had to come back and do some form of embodiment practice just to feel, I guess, these are my own words now, just to feel a little bit more real or human or back inside of your body. So yeah, can you just give me some background to that?
Yeah, God, I'm like, even going back to these memories, it doesn't feel good. For me, it's like the corporate culture can sometimes be so dehumanizing, and there is no space for the human self, like for the feelings, for the emotions, for like, and not even like, oh, I need to be emotional, just like, what am I actually feeling? There was times for me, corporate felt like I'd go in Monday, walk out Friday, and not know anything that happened in between. It's like I was just in the roller coaster of it. And the weekend would come, and then it would be like a crash and a reconnection to my body and a sense of feeling, and then like re-emerging and a coming back to life. It's like, okay, I'm back in relationship with this thing. And it felt like what was missing is really like the space and capacity to come back into human connection while in the workplace, to not have to wait for the weekend for this to happen. And in truth, like when we are in human connection, that's where the best work happens. Like best work happens through good communication, through, you know, empathy, through clarity, through being able to focus. And this is really one and the same. Like if to focus, we have to cut out other people, and we have to cut out, it's like ourselves from our own body. That's like stress inducing. And it is one way to get things done, but it's stress inducing. And for me, there's a question of like, okay, how can we still create high performing results, but do it with less, I want to say effort, but I'm not sure effort is completely the correct word. And like what happens for me as I say that, it's like, it's less driven from the head and more driven from the body. It's like, can my whole body come into the corporate environment? Mm-hmm. And I'm aware that for people listening to this, it's like, it's very rare in corporate that the corporation will be responsible for giving you this relationship to yourself. Some of you may have an understanding of it, like if you've spent time in, you know, a martial arts or yoga, or really connecting to your body and building that relationship for yourself, you're going to be hearing this and going like, yeah, this makes sense. I wish there was more of this, or maybe my company provides this for me. For a lot of people, there's not even an awareness of that. It's like, if all you've lived in the 9 to 5 mindset, you don't really have the capacity to be like, oh, I can't. It's like you can't even synthesize how it could be different. Yeah, does that make sense? I kind of took your thing and we drew a massive tangent.
No, I mean there's so many ideas in that, so many things that I relate to, in the sense that organizations are places where you go to be productive. So in one respect, I think it generates this culture where we are in this relationship of showcasing that productivity. And maybe it's not just the organization, you know, maybe it's more of a societal thing where we are just having to produce all the time in order to feel valued and appreciated. But then also I feel like people can sometimes curtail themselves into these roles where it becomes safe and comfortable to do that. So anything outside of that, any connection with self might be daunting. Any expression of emotion might be daunting, because it means potentially you're having conversations about these things, or you're having to notice them more.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps as you say this. And I think like corporations are, you know, they're just like a manifestation of society. And like for me, I love what you're speaking on. It's like, it's not so much even about the corporation or the organization. It's more about what's the worldview we're functioning on. And if value is derived of productivity, and that's the only sense of value, we're just going to keep driving productivity at expense of, like, for the purpose of what? We're all stressed out and overworked. We're not really enjoying this. We're just enjoying the sense of, or the idea of purpose that driving this hard gives us. And I remember a friend of mine who got pregnant, and her first trimester was really fucking hard. And she goes to me, the hardest thing was dropping my attachment to productivity and my product, and recognizing how much self-worth my productivity was giving me. When I couldn't be productive, I had to deal with all the shit that was underneath there. And I was like, yeah, that's a major aha moment. And I see this in my own life as well. Like, I can take a day or two off, but if it goes on for too long, I'm like, I'm not worthy as a human being. And this isn't inherently true. It's just the culture and the society that we are in, essentially.
Yeah. And so I feel like, because your teaching is so unique, I think, you know, you don't just teach how to do public speaking, but you teach more of the embodiment around it that potentially, and it's maybe more subtle forms of being able to stand on stage and deal with fear, you know, confront it as it comes up. I feel like maybe that's what, there's all sorts of subtle things that we need to change inside of a corporate environment that might not be massive things, massive things to us in terms of the structure, but they're really subtle in terms of the way we actually are dealing with ourselves. Yeah. So, any reflections on that?
Yeah, just let me see how to slide words into what I'm seeing or feeling. I feel corporate culture, organization work can be used as a tool for betterment of humanity. And I don't mean by the output, I mean by the sheer fact of being in the workplace. That can be a value and an asset to people's lives. And for me, the link there is it's connecting us deeper to ourselves. Going to the workplace is asking us to be more of ourselves, not less of ourselves. And for some people, this might mean changing roles, changing careers, whatever the thing is, because there's a sense of like, this isn't who I am, and I've been trying to fit into a box that, you know, whoever thought was good for me. And I feel there's an inherent vulnerability in that, in being true to ourselves, because it's a convenient lie to keep saying, yeah, this is what I want to be doing. And it's like, this is the scary piece. And when I've done trainings with corporations, it's, let's not even call it corporations. Like there's one team in specific I have in mind. And when I was working with them, it was like, oh, a bunch of these people are scared of getting fired. And no one's actually saying it. And I was like, does anyone just want to say this? Like, how many of you are afraid of being fired? And 2 or 3 of them put their hand up. And I was like, do any of you want to speak to that? And the woman who was the manager, she just took a deep breath. It's like on some level, she was aware of this. And it's like she needed that from them to be able to let go of this as much as they needed to say it to free themselves. And when you have things that are suppressed like that, it's going to cause tension that we're not even aware of. And the moment it moves, it's like the team has the ability to connect on a deeper level. And if you have, you know, deeper connection, you're going to have better work coming out of that. So that for me, it's like when I'm teaching public speaking or I'm teaching communication, essentially, it's the same thing. It's like, how deeply authentic can we be with ourselves and with what's moving through us, and to communicate from that place.
Well, I mean, yeah, that said, I was going to ask you, so that's one, I guess, principle that you teach that can actually be very, very useful for people inside of organizations. Just the being real, the being in touch, being authentic with yourself. Are there other forms of noticing how you bypass yourself inside of a company, and or what other pieces do you have to come back to when you're outside of that scope?
Say that one more time. I have a very specific story that comes to mind, even though I haven't completely grasped your question.
Okay. Well, I was thinking initially we were talking about the post and how you were in this corporate environment, and then there was, well, what was relevant to me when you were speaking was around the performance and the productivity, and that this whole week happened and then a big blow up, and then you could come back to yourself. So I'm wondering around, or us kind of unpacking that and generating more awareness of the things that we might be bypassing when we are in a corporate environment.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, what I would be saying, it's like, where are the tensions that aren't being expressed? And I remember at one point I worked when I was in the photographic industry, but I was doing sales, and things were changing from up top, and that was being infiltrated into management, and it was being infiltrated with us. And I remember just like, I was pretty pushing back to my manager, and we're like, all right, we need to make a time to sit down and talk about this. And I remember looking at her and going like, I have love and respect for you, but the way this information is being delivered, I'm like, I don't believe that you even believe it. And I can see you're being asked to play a cog in the thing. And I'm like, I can't play that. It's like, I'm going to have to step outside of any sense of, it's not just integrity. It's like realness. It's like, you're not being real with me and you're asking me to work for you. And I need the realness. Like, if I'm going to be in integrity with you and the clients I'm working with, I need to feel a sense of, if I put my hand out, you're going to meet me there, not like you're pretending and playing charades. And I feel like that kind of trust you can't fake, and you can't do a keynote presentation on, and then like everything's going to be okay. It's like, that has to be in the culture. Like, can we actually meet each other and feel a sense of solidarity?
Yeah, it's beautiful. And how do you teach that to people? So I know that you teach that inside of speaker training. So yeah.
So I would say there's a sense of, firstly, awareness in what it is that's happening inside us. And to begin with, you could call that mindfulness. And for a long time, I think people got stuck in mindfulness, which I don't find overly productive, like useful, but not productive. For me, the next stage is like, there's a sense of embodiment. It's like, okay, I'm aware of what I'm feeling in my body, and I'm not just thinking all the time. There's different sensations that move at different parts of them, and I can move with them. And for me, the third piece is what I call enlivenment. It's like, okay, so when I can separate from the stress and the intensity, and I have an awareness of the body, what is it that my body wants to express? And my body is me. It's like, it's the truth of me. It's what I'm doing when I'm not running to be somewhere else. And if I'm expressing from the body, what's possible there? And often that can be vulnerable, because the truth of who we are is going to ask us to do things that are different, that are creative, that create possibility, that create engagement. And usually it's things we've had an aversion to. Like, because it's easier to just stay in the mind track. And it's like, here is where all the possibility happens. The thing is, though, we don't have control. It's like, we have control. We can always opt in or out, but we're opening like a magic key, so to speak.
Yeah. And I feel like this is probably why your course is so transformational and potentially life-changing, you know, not just for people who want to public speak, but then in other areas of their life as well.
I guess there's a curiosity when you say that. How was it for you? Because you were involved in the course as well.
Yeah. I mean, I find that a large part of what you were saying, you know, being on stage and, you know, having this audience, so that there's all this energy on you and there's confrontation of everything that you are. Potentially not confrontation, maybe that's the wrong word, but visibility of everything that you are. And how do you be with that and be on stage so that you are presenting in a very authentic way and still being vulnerable with it and getting the message across? I think that was key, because and this came out of your teachings, is that, you know, if we are with our body, then we are resonating almost much more clearly with people, because that's what they're attuned to, or that's what they're noticing, rather than just the words that you're saying. And inside of a corporate environment, potentially, that when we are, say, dealing with engineers and data, and I find sometimes that all of that goes amiss, you know, or that there's potentially not space for conversations or noticing behavior, because it is about the tangible output of things.
Yeah, Years ago, I had a client that was an engineer, and a long time before that, he was one of my first meditation students when I was first teaching meditation early on. And I remember after he'd been working with me for a couple of months, he was like, Miroslav, if you told me that the life I'm living now and the experiences I'm having was possible before I started working with you, I just would not have even believed you. It could have been like, you're telling me aliens are real or something. It's very much that idea kind of mind frame. And after him kind of going through the process of landing back in his body and letting life open from there, it's like, you don't have to debate the validity of this when you're living it in your own experience.
Yeah. And I feel, even now, I feel like you have a deep, profound grounding in that as well. I come across people who are very anxious and in overwhelm and very, very busy because they're just trying to keep up pace with everything that's going on. And that the softening, the softening doesn't come natural to a lot of people. I've also heard a comment from an engineer that he doesn't have emotions because he's an engineer.
I mean, that to me, it's a bit like, yeah, we can go there and we can say there is a predisposition or a stereotype around this, but there was a time I didn't have emotions either. There was a time I didn't cry for like maybe a decade or something. And I remember the first time I started crying again, I was sitting next to my partner and I was like, am I doing this right? Like, is this what I'm supposed to do? I can't remember. And there wasn't even, like, the crazy thing, Patricia, is there wasn't even an awareness that I'd stopped crying. It's like 10 years had gone by without me crying. And, you wake up at some point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you enter companies, with the teaching that you do in the style that you do, are you often confronted with the question of kind of muting some of the aspects of your training, or are you confronted with maybe more anxiety around what it is that you're training?
You mean from participants?
From participants or corporates themselves, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I'd say there's a bit of healthy tension. It's like you feel the crossing of the bridge into something different. Like, I'm not going to give you another presentation. And there's a sense of like, it's like, oh, we're getting real here. We're opening the conversation into a place we don't usually go. And like, after the initial, let's say, discomfort, my sense is usually there's quite a big release. It's like we're allowing and creating for more humanness in the space. And I think for some people, when they get the opening, like what I'm a stand for and what I'm inviting into the culture, it's like there's not even a deliberation. It's just like a fuck yes. Like, it's like they're already kind of, I haven't even stepped forward and they're like, yes, more of this. Like, it's like they haven't even been able to have the words to say, I want this, but they just know they want it on a deep level.
Yeah,
and I find that really helps other team members as well. It's like when you can see that someone's already already has that culture moving inside them and they can be with it, it creates a bridge for other people to move across to.
Yeah. That's beautiful. It sounds like a lot of work around OD, or behavioral change or any kind of transformational piece. And is it a lot of youngsters that are coming to you, or people in a sort of network who know about embodiment more?
I'd say it's a mix, right? I'd say there's a stretch of people in terms of age, everything from like retired people to youngsters. I would say the the theme in the people I work with most often is there's a relationship to self. There's meditation or yoga or something that's taken place, self-inquiry. There's been an interest in, who am I? What am I about? What am I bringing to the world? And that relationship was what fosters this work to be able to happen. Yeah, if people are in resistance to that, then it's a bit trickier.
Yeah. And as you extend yourself into cultures, how do you see this transformation for them as individuals and for organizations or even for society take place?
I think we can go to the workplace and be filled up when we come back home. I mean, most of the time, that's my experience of work. I think it was Khalil Gibran, the poet, that had a line that was something like work is devotion. And not like put on the facade to work as devotion, like let your work be an act of devotion. Like, let it be I'm going to poetic language here, but let it be a living prayer. Like, let it be your song and the song that you were born to bring into the world. Let your work be an expression of that. And I feel that when we move into that space, it's like a different relationship is possible. And I also get, it's like, this doesn't happen overnight. Privilege is a conversation, experience is a conversation, what we have access to is a conversation. Like, I had times where I was working night shift and doing furniture delivery, and it's like, that was not my soul expressing itself. That was me just making ends meet. But there was a direction in where I wanted to go for this part of me to be met, like a deeper yearning and recognizing I'm going to spend most of my life working, and what is the work that's going to fulfill me? And I feel that's really an important question we all have to ask ourselves, unless we're just happy to resign to suffering. And again, it doesn't happen overnight. Like, that could be 10 years between you making that choice and actually being in the experience of it. But that 10 years is going to be an epic journey in itself. And like, imagine a world where, let's say, most people are having the experience of going to work, feeling fulfilled in that environment, and then coming back to their family after that. And what effect that has on society, on culture, on mental health, on who we can be in the workplace.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think you expressed it so well.
If like, let's say corporate was a character of some kind. So if it was like metamorphosized into a person or a creature or something like that, let's just play poetically for a moment. What do you imagine that being looking like?
It feels a lot like the lens of OD that I use at the moment. I feel like different businesses can be different characters or different organisms. And it's kind of, they can be really peculiar in themselves. So it's, how do you understand this peculiar organism and then figure out how it can be more healthy or more capable, or whatever it wants to do, but also bringing a whole lot of compassion so that we're not so stressed out in being part of this kind of peculiar creature. Yeah, I mean, I've met organizations that seem like big dinosaurs, old dinosaurs. And it's the attachment to some of their history and legacy that's really important, but really, like, the big elephant in the room, really holding them back. Because parts of them want to just be this young, innovative kind of dinosaur. So yeah, it's how do you have that, or bring a language to it that people can start to have these conversations around you know, how do we do this better? I find that, you know, some of the stuff that we do now is outdated. So some of the HR systems that we use that are about reward and punishment really mimic, you know, some old ways of managing kids, if you like, in a schoolyard. But that there's, I guess there's so much more intelligence that different people bring that we need to bring into conversations and have discussions about. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I like it. I actually just pictured, like, I like what you were offering, how different, you know, businesses and corporations could be different creatures. I just had this idea for a novel of like American Gods. And if you're unfamiliar with American Gods, I know you are, but just for listeners, it's like the gods that migrants brought over to America and slaves and all that. Like the gods are still alive, but they're alive in human bodies, and they're not really as powerful as they once were. So it's this sense of, you know, they've all taken human form. And there's just this idea for me. I'm like, I wonder if you know, someone was to write this novel around corporations, businesses, showing up as human beings or as creatures or animals, and just that interaction, and I guess the unresolved parts moving through and what needs to be spoken or expressed in a dialogue or a container like that.
Yeah. That would be incredible. That would be, I imagine, the likes of like Apple and Google and then the oil companies.
And I'm already seeing like characters as you say this, like how they would show up and look in the real world.
Yeah. And then these old government organizations who are like, no. You know? Yeah, be very interesting. So I did want to ask a question around your work in the corporate environment, and if anything has felt traumatic.
There's like an immediate sadness inside me when you ask this, and it's like we think of traumatic being a big deal, like, I don't know, being bullied at school or something, and it's like it's not that kind of traumatic. It's like the culture or the system that at least I've been in, I can't speak for all corporate here, is traumatic. And it's like, it's the air we're breathing is traumatic. It's like constant striving, constant pushing, constant overworking, and we're just accepting that as normal as opposed to questioning it. And, you know, being like, hey, is this really the way life is supposed to be lived? And, you know, I'm like, I could go into specifics here. Like there's days that I would work like 12 hours straight without even stopping to eat. And I can say I wasn't hungry, but I can also say it's probably because of the stress and the adrenaline running through my body. And I can also say there was weeks where that was the case, where, you know, I might be able to run and get a sushi and then keep working. And that was like internalized within the company structure. Like it wasn't even questioned. It's just like, it's what you do. And I'm not sure that's okay. Like, yeah, we can do it, you know, like, sure, we can do a lot of things. People go to war. That doesn't mean it's good or healthy or useful, or that we can't do better. So for me, there is, I don't know, there's a reclamation of what it means to come back into our humanity.
Yeah, you did mention something about it being systemic and almost something that we don't question. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of scary when you think about it, that that's systemic and normal within our lives.
And it feels for me, you know, it might be even a bigger question around, you know, our capitalist markets, consumerism, and technology, how potentially these pieces in their most extreme forms are potentially not healthy for us.
Yeah, I don't know if I have many words for that. Like, I'm hearing you, I'm seeing that. I don't believe things are black and white either. Like, it's like stress can be healthy. Like there's a healthy amount of stress. And then there's also like, okay, this is an attachment to stress that's become a way of life. Where's the healthy part? We're going to have to go looking for that. And I feel for me, it's like the control needs to be there around the capacity to switch off. Like when I was under those intense environments where I was really like, doing like the 12-hour shifts, I wasn't able to switch off. I wasn't able to switch off when I went home. Wasn't able to switch off when I was sleeping. Sometimes, often, I wasn't even able to switch off on my days off. I mean, I don't know what your experience of it is, but now even when I think about it, it's like I feel like I'm being eaten from the inside.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that immediately springs to mind the fact that you have to work a 9-to-5 job, and that potentially you don't have flexibility to say, on this day, I really just, I can't do anything, like I need to rest. And when you're not given that kind of flexibility, then it does become, I think part of your psychological contract with the company is broken because you don't, nobody's honoring that trust or that well-being for you that you need.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Patricia, and really feeling like the place of compassion you're speaking from when you say that.
Yeah.
It's, probably some way away, but this idea of compassion being a value in a corporate mission statement is, I'm not sure I've ever come across it yet. There might be variations of it, but
yeah, I mean, I feel like I have seen it before, but maybe in the healthcare setting, where it's about customers, and it's potentially not within the system or with each other as employees. Yeah. There was something else that came up, which is, more around embodiment. So what does that, for people who don't know this work at all, and I'm not sure if embodiment is the right word for it, because I think you have mentioned some aspects of it in your teaching, but if you can share a little bit more around what that means.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, all words can have different angles of looking at them. Embodiment, sometimes it's like theorizes any sense of movement with the body, any sense of relationship to the body. So for some people, like, martial arts and yoga and sport and all of this stuff is embodiment. For me, that's not a particular interest. For me, the interest is embodied presence. Like, how much presence and awareness can we bring for our body? Because the capacity to be able to stand on my arms is useful when I'm standing on my arms, not so much useful in everyday life, So it's like there's this one level of embodiment that's physical and productive, even like being able to run really fast. Some people would say going to the gym is an embodiment exercise. I'm like, yes and no. It's like a lot of gyms I've been in, they're either playing the news or blasting the music. The people are disembodied. It's like they're not actually connected to their own body while they're working out. And there's an invitation of like, what would the gym space look like if the intention of the invitation was to come into the body while we're working out, to actually feel what's happening in the body. So like that for me is more so the direction. It's not just physical, but it's a meeting of what happens when the fullness of who we are moves through our body. Do you need me to go more? I'm like, this is making sense to me, but I'm aware that like maybe for a person first listening to this, it doesn't yet make sense.
I mean, yeah, you can go more, but I love the analogy of the gym because I do think like I've seen that before. Yeah. I feel like it's that subtle shift that we were potentially touching on earlier?
Yeah, and there's a beautiful intimacy there. Like if we go to the gym thing, it's like people are still avoiding of being in their bodies. They're probably attached to the outcome, which is like having a good body or working out or maybe moving through some tension. But for me, it's like if I'm working out, why in the world do I need to listen to the news at the same time? It's like I can go through the motions of both, but I'm not really fully present with either of those two things. And when someone is more in relationship to what's happening in their body, it creates like a stillness and a calm and a presence around them. And traditionally, we might see this with things like meditation, where that's the only, the only focus is let's just be. I mean, that's one expression of it. For me, the interest is how do we create and invite that sense of beingness for everything we're doing? And I don't want to get this confused with mindfulness, which is like, I will be mindful. It's like, yeah, can you be mindful and keep acting and keep expressing and keep being yourself and keep being productive and finding a way to do that in a genuine way?
Yeah. I almost want to take this, well, just in terms of an analogy of, being inside of a corporate environment, and you're either going to a meeting where there's lots of stuff going on, or you're dealing somewhat with a team or a person who, you might not be on the best terms with. So, but you need to get something done together. So, as you say, suggest, you bringing that presence to what it is that you're doing. I wonder if we imagine the scenario of being more embodied around it, what would that look like?
Yeah, there's a woman I'm currently working with that's high up in the corporate ladder, and she was telling me how she was in a meeting that was predominantly male dominated. There was only her and one other woman in it. And this was like CEOs, all the high executives. And she goes, that other woman got cut off a number of times. And she was like, since working with you, like I noticed the fear inside myself. And I was like, I have to make a stand for this. And because she had that, it's like the embodiment and the presence is what created the space for her to recognize that this wasn't okay. And I have to make a stand for this. And I have to do it in a way that brings people into connection, not polarizes us. And she was able to do that. And that wasn't even an option, even though she's been in that company for years.
Yeah, that's quite massive. Because I think that we do often see, disagreements or standing up and, saying anything about the power differentials, we see as potentially argumentative or polarizing. It's almost the reaction to any sort of perceived conflict.
Yeah. And like maybe sometimes it can be healthy to have a space to express conflict in a way that's not dialogued. Like, can we just go somewhere where that's like vented and released, so we can actually come back and meet in what is the solution, what is the outcome we're going for? Yeah. I think it's funny, like I'm just going to touch on something really quickly here. Like we think of therapy as something we do for personal issues. I have what you could call a therapist just for my business. And I don't mean a coach. I mean, she's not teaching me strategy. She's not looking at my sales report. She's not looking at my outcome. She's only supporting me with the emotional stuff that comes up around my business. I mean, I think calling it a therapist is funny because most people think, I don't know, I'm going to her for child issues. And in a way I am, like my childhood stuff comes up in relationship to my business, but that's not the intention. The intention of me going to her is to create more output in my business. And I have a very clear awareness that to do that, I have to keep releasing the emotional stuff that comes up along the way. Like not bypassing it, not just doing the thing. Sometimes doing the thing is the answer. Other times it's like, no, I need to hold this part so it can integrate, so I can keep going on and doing things the way I need to do them. And I'm not sure, but I haven't really spoken to anyone where that exists, where it's like a therapy arm exists for the purpose of productivity, and not in a way that's like driving it. It's like, we need more productivity. It's like, as we deal with these pieces, productivity is the outcome that's going to come out of it.
Yeah, I feel like that's so important. I've seen some branches of organizational development where they do more psychodynamic work. So having conversations that can bring up a lot of stuff. Transactional analysis is also one theory that looks at, you know, how people interact. Are they interacting from a parent, adult, or child level? And is this parent overly disciplinarian, or is this a wounded or adapted child? So there are some theories, but yeah, a therapist for your business would be very, very useful. Yeah. And also saying that I see that a lot of conflict plays out the same issues that people have experienced before. And if it's unresolved, then it can turn out badly.
Yeah, and I think like this for me comes back again to that worldview. It's like, what are we considering as the key outcome of success? Like, if success is, you know, a big house, a big car, and a big family, then it's like, why would you care about any of this? Just keep going. You know, you think you're going to get further in life with that kind of mentality. And I'm not saying anyone has this, but the cultural frame is one of this, at least living in Australia. And I'm sure for a lot of the Western world, it's very similar, as opposed to success being, how do I come into the deepest connection and truth of who I am? Because for me, my business, like, yeah, it's a vehicle that creates income and profits and supports me to live the lifestyle I want. But if that business wasn't supporting me to grow to the depth that's possible inside me, I wouldn't be doing it. Like, the lifestyle and outcome isn't enough of a value for me. The growth and connection to myself is.
Yeah. And I find that that's an amazing space to live in. I also find lots of people who are not in that space with their work or their purpose or their vision of success. Yeah.
I was listening to this astrologer on stage once, a long time ago, and he said this story that always stuck with me. He goes, he was with one of his clients, and I don't know if it was like in his home or in his boardroom or something like that, but he said he had pictures of all the mountains he's hiked, and there was like lots of them. And he goes, I walked into the office and I looked at him and I looked at these pictures and I said, and even after you've hiked all of these mountains, your father still doesn't love you. And he's like, the moment I said it, he broke down, started crying, and never climbed another mountain after that. Yeah, I feel that there's a piece there around like, how many of us are truly content with what we have, and this continual striving to be somewhere else. And it's like, we create the corporations and organizations and their structures as collectively, and not individually, like not me and you, but collectively, like we as a race have created them to serve the purpose of allowing us to feel overworked, allowing us to feel not enough, allowing us to feel that no matter how much we do, there's more, and there's always somewhere better to be. So I feel there's this part in coming into ownership of that piece of ourselves as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like responsibility around what we've created in organizations, as well as how we move with ourselves.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
What can people do based on your experience to not feel so out of the body
you know, one thing that's still lingering for me is like that the systemic piece we mentioned, and systemic is a bit of a buzzword, but I'm like, really what that means to me is like, it's not the events that are traumatic, it's the air that's traumatic. Like the air we're breathing sometimes, at least that's been my experience in some of the companies I've worked for, is like the air is traumatic. And I remember it, and it's like, it's not actually, like, it's just air. But the culture that's breathing and feeding in that air is the problem. And I remember for me, when times were really stressed, I was like, I just need to be outside and breathing fresh air, like not being in this culture. And there's a question there of like, there's one specific place I'm thinking of. I'm like, all that would have been necessary is just to have a small meditation room where it's like work doesn't come into this space. This isn't a lunch room. This is just a space to drop in and be with yourself. And maybe you can do yoga, maybe you can meditate, but it's like, it's quiet and it's just a place to be. And simply from a hierarchical perspective, making a space for that invites that experience into the workplace. It says, this is okay, and we want more of this.
Mm-hmm.
Because trying to find a place to drop in and a place that's overworked is really, really hard. It's like trying to find stillness when you have, you know, 3 kids throwing things around and fighting and whatever. It's like, it sure looks like stillness. You can close your eyes and pretend you're meditating, but it's not real. You know, your attention is still with the fact that the kids are making a mess and having to care for them, and a part of your mind's thinking about it. Like, it's not real. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Yeah, there's one more piece, and this is something I'm really passionate about. There's looking like we're doing the thing, and there's actually doing the thing. Like, a yoga class can be embodied and it can just be exercise. It can connect us to ourselves, or it can just feel like we've had a stretch. And like, for this change really to happen, if I'm someone that's, you know, let's say in HR, or that's booking like, okay, we need a yoga teacher, so it's going to come in once a week and they're going to help people. It's good for our corporate culture. You know, we can tick off a box. People wanted this, and now we've done it. It's like, that to me is one very small part of it. I would actually invite that if leaders want to create this in their workplaces, they have to make a commitment to this outside of the workplace. And I remember speaking to a man once, it was very much like a blokey bloke, and he started doing yoga. And this guy was like ex-military, like he was not a yoga kind of personality. And then he started telling his mates, you should do this. And they were just kind of laughing at him. They're like, you know, whatever, you keep doing whatever you want, but just like, no. And he was like, what yoga does for me internally is what the gym does for me externally. And it was like, only for someone coming, and he was a business owner at this stage, multiple businesses, only for someone like him coming into relationship with that, can he then genuinely bring that through his organizations if he chooses to. If corporate wellness is just a thing to tick off the box and there's not an embodied relationship with it, if they haven't gone on the journey themselves, it's just a facade. And I'm saying this lovingly, like, it's a step forward, but it's just a facade. It's like, we have to be willing to walk into the trenches first and be like, okay, this is what this feels like, and this is why it's important. And unless we have that relationship, it's better just being honest and saying like, I don't know, and this doesn't make sense. And how can I create a relationship to this part of myself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's massive. Yeah, what comes to mind is I've seen a lot of people suffer heart attacks or die an early death because of the amount of stress or the positions that they've been in. Yeah, which is obviously sad, but I feel like that's you know, where you are in a position where power becomes a thing, or your role becomes a thing, or it overtakes all aspects of your identity, and it can drive you to illness, right?
Yeah, and they're like, even as you speak this, I'm like, there's such massive compassion there. Like, I run a small company and I'm aware of the intensity of the responsibility, you know, let alone when you're like, you don't even, you're not even being the CEO, like that is a lot of responsibility. But it's like anywhere in the corporate chain, there is responsibility. Like climbing your way up the chain is accepting more responsibility. And it's like this, like, you know, for me, there has to be a sense of relationship and compassion with the amount of ourselves we put into any position of leadership. And for the people that are doing that, it's like, it's huge. It's a huge undertaking. And most people are doing it from a place of service as well, you know, wanting a better change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What you said, you know, you're saying this lovingly, like how can we do this as leaders? Yeah, I think that's a really important piece, acknowledging that of course they're doing this and they're giving everything, but to what extent, right? Thank you so much, Miroslav, for having this conversation. I know we went like everywhere, but I think we covered a lot of really good stuff, really important stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I thoroughly enjoyed this, Patricia. Thank you.
Cool. Can you please share with everybody how people can reach you?
Yeah, so my website, my personal website is miroslavp.com. So that's for any speaking or training engagements, miroslavp.com. And the Enlivened Speaking Institute, all one word.com. So that's for the speaker trainings. If you're looking at speaking or want to take your, we could say, communication skills, relationship to yourself to a whole new level through the act of speaking. That's the website for that.
Great, and we'll pop the links below so it's easy for people to connect into.